Leaning on his sword, the battered warrior Sanghyun knelt in exhaustion, gasping as the crushing weight of his 55 years finally caught up to him. In the tense quiet before the next fight, a battle-scarred veteran named Sanghyun looked down, wondering what a man his age was doing still on the front lines instead of preparing for retirement. From the suffocating darkness of a cave entrance, guttural growls announced the arrival of 3 shadowy beasts, their red eyes fixed on the lone armored warrior Sanghyun who stood his ground. On a desolate, rocky plain, the exhausted warrior Sanghyun found himself confronting a colossal black dragon and a hulking horned beast, muttering in frustration as he gripped his sword for the inevitable fight. As monstrous dragons shattered into pieces around him with a deafening crash, the swordsman Sanghyun landed with overwhelming force, lamenting that while others his age were hailed as swordmasters and sword gods, he was known only by mocking titles like the Sword Geezer. The nightmare began on jagged, rocky ground, where Sanghyun watched in horror as a monstrous winged creature held a captive woman aloft, her bloodied form struggling as she desperately kicked and pleaded to be set free. In a moment of desperate crisis, Sanghyun's thoughts drifted to his lonely past in an orphanage, even as the bloodied woman in his arms pleaded for him not to be scared. But on that day, Sanghyun's terrified plea to run was violently cut short by a sickening crunch, his world exploding into a spray of red. Frozen in horror before the broken sign of the Happy House, a young boy named Sanghyun witnessed a nightmare unfold as shadowy abominations tore apart those he considered family, their terrified screams for help lost in the unfolding massacre. The world dissolved into a blur of terror for the young, injured Sanghyun as a monstrous shadow loomed over him, his screams swallowed by the resurfacing memory of how everyone he loved had been brutally killed. A cataclysmic event known as the Great Collapse flooded the world with monsters, leaving a lone, terrified boy to witness the devastation from amidst the ruins of a crumbling city. As the rain fell like tears, a horrifying memory surfaced of a monstrous, tentacled entity looming over a bloodied Sanghyun, who roared in agony, recalling how it had taken everything he held dear. However, amidst swirling dark energy and against a monstrous red-eyed creature, a determined Sanghyun took a single step forward, his gleaming sword held ready to protect his fallen companion. It was on the very brink of oblivion that Sanghyun, bloodied and ensnared by swirling tendrils of darkness, felt his resolve harden as a brilliant blue light ignited within his eyes. In the silent aftermath of a brutal battle, a grievously wounded Sanghyun lay helpless on the ground, the triumphant shadow of his armored conqueror looming over him. In a sudden flash of brilliant blue light, the armored warrior Sanghyun materialized, his lips curling into a faint smirk as he calmly asked if the other person was all right. In what felt like his final moments, a bloodied and broken Sanghyun knelt with tears streaming from his glowing blue eyes as a miracle began to unfold, bathing him in an ethereal light. In a maelstrom of dust and debris, the warrior Sanghyun brought his glowing weapon down with crushing force upon the massive reptilian beast. Surrounded by the aftermath of destruction, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his scarred face, Sanghyun's resolve hardened as he recalled the singular moment that ignited his lifelong ambition to be just like the hero who had saved him. In the midst of a desperate, gore-splattered clash, a grievously wounded Sanghyun met the attack of a grotesque goblin, his mind screaming that he had already given everything he had. The recollection began with a desperate clash, as Sanghyun gritted his teeth against a monstrous foe, remembering how he had once slain monsters left and right in a seemingly endless struggle. Surrounded by the fiery glow of what seemed like a desperate battle, a bloodied and disheveled Sanghyun stared upward, tormented by the crushing realization that he had not grown any stronger. The weight of that realization crushed him, forcing him to his knees amidst the bodies of his comrades as he lamented that he had failed to protect anyone. On a battlefield soaked in the blood of fallen monsters, the warrior Sanghyun cradled his gravely injured companion, his grief and rage erupting in a raw, anguished scream. Surrounded by the defeated carcasses of monstrous red reptiles, an exhausted Sanghyun knelt in the dust, demanding through ragged breaths if the distant hooded figure finally understood how much this fight was killing him. As the ground trembled from a thunderous impact, a sweat-soaked Sanghyun tightened his grip on his weapon, muttering that he was getting far too old for this brutal fight. Sweat dripped from a fresh wound on Sanghyun's forehead as the beleaguered warrior gripped his sword, his expression lost in a haze of utter confusion. Pinned beneath the crushing foot of a colossal red-eyed beast, the armored warrior Sanghyun cried out in despair, demanding to know if his failure was finally evident. With a monstrous roar that tore through the chaos, a scaled beast with incandescent eyes unleashed a blinding torrent of energy from its gaping maw. Broken and scarred on desolate ground, the wounded Sanghyun could only lament that his life had amounted to nothing, no family, friends, or dreams, leaving him with only the crushing weight of his regrets. Despite the fresh cuts and bruises marring his face, Sanghyun offered a strained, contemptuous smile, inwardly scorning the entire situation as a pathetic mess. It all began with a single, overwhelming regret that echoed in the stark silence, the desperate wish to rewind time. In the crimson glow of a fading sun, the triumphant player Sanghyun Shin stood over the corpse of his monstrous foe as a system notification confirmed his hard-won victory in clearing the Elder Dragon's lair. Amidst a swirling vortex of energy, the battle-worn warrior Sanghyun stood resolute in his damaged armor, sighing with weary exasperation as he tightened his grip on his massive sword. His face a mask of battle-worn fury, the 55-year-old warrior Sanghyun Shin let out a raw scream, demanding to know why a man his age still had to fight with such desperation. As he slid uncontrollably down a jagged cliff face at sunset, the swordsman Sanghyun Shin reflected on his lonely 30-year path, a journey whose greatest achievement was simply breaking into the top 100 domestic rankings. While humbly reflecting on his own insignificance compared to the world's greatest players, the battle-worn Sanghyun was suddenly interrupted as a brilliant light washed over him, his eyes widening in pure astonishment. As a glowing skill book materialized over the rocky terrain with a soft hum, Sanghyun watched it intently, wondering if his unique ability to devour artifacts would work on this new form of power. In the quiet aftermath of a brutal confrontation, a battered Sanghyun recoiled in shock as a brilliant, unexpected flash of light tore through the dim surroundings. Clutching a newly acquired glowing tome, Sanghyun could only look up in awe as a swirling vortex of blue energy heralded the dramatic arrival of the constellation, the late blooming scholar. From within an ethereal blue glow, the hooded and spectacled visage of the late-blooming scholar appeared with a gentle smile, offering praise for the protagonist's hard work and complimenting the decisiveness of his finishing move. As the armored constellation known as the late-blooming scholar made his brilliant entrance, the cloaked figure felt a profound wave of gratitude, humbled that such a powerful being would willingly bind himself to a self-proclaimed third-rate swordsman. A glowing notification heralded a monumental shift in his potential, detailing the incredible, level-locked bonuses of a unique title, the late-blooming scholar, reserved for those who persevere. A soft pop echoed in the quiet space as a small, robed familiar emerged from the glowing book in Sanghyun's hands, projecting a spectral display that confirmed his current level had reached a formidable 650. Exhausted and wounded, Sanghyun's frustration was palpable as he stared at the glowing tome, lamenting that its absurdly high-level 850 requirement still kept its benefits out of his reach. Amidst the aftermath of battle, a system prompt urged the grime-covered Sanghyun to devour the glowing skillbook in his hands, an idea he met with a knowing smirk, confirming it was exactly what he'd been planning. With a confident grin, the battle-worn Sanghyun announced that it was time, his outstretched hand summoning a brilliant purple-blue orb of raw energy. His journey began not with a flurry of powers, but with the stark revelation of a single, defining skill that emerged from the void of his awakening, the ability to devour artifacts. Driven to desperation in his quest to understand a mysterious ability, Sanghyun stood over a flaming pan, confessing that he had even resorted to boiling and roasting strange artifacts like common food. In a room thick with the acrid smoke of failed magic, Sanghyun stared down at the ornate accessories, his frustration mounting as he admitted that his ridiculous attempt to somehow devour them had been for nothing. With a strained swallow, an injured Sanghyun finally found the answer he had sought for 30 long years, a revelation that unleashed a torrent of brilliant blue energy from his outstretched hand. After what felt like an eternity of searching through the endless void of possibilities, a single glowing truth finally emerged, proclaiming that the solution had been found. Standing before the ancient artifact, Sanghyun focused his will, explaining the process of syncing his mana according to the item's tier as a brilliant blue swirl of energy enveloped it. Battered and weary, Sanghyun looked away with a bitter scoff, reflecting on how he'd only just taken his first step when everyone else had understood their skills from the very beginning. With the weight of his quest settling upon him, Sanghyun opened the ancient, gem-studded book, its pages exhaling a soft hiss as a mysterious light began to emanate from within. The mysterious light, however, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and he slunk to the ground with a dejected thud, cursing his own foolishness for thinking it would ever work on a skill book. A system notification materialized in the form of a small, anxious scholar who, clutching his briefcase, regretfully informed him that as a late-blooming scholar, he could find almost no information on the desired skill. The cheerful figure then suggested another attempt at mana sync since they had plenty of time, a preposterous notion that made the already stressed Sanghyun tremble in sheer disbelief. Before a mysterious glowing figure, a desperate Sanghyun cried out in anguish, his face etched with tears as he lamented having no time left with the age of 60 fast approaching. His panic escalating, he clutched the large book and frantically explained to the constellation that he was old enough to be a grandfather, stressing the tragic brevity of human life. Before the injured and armored Sanghyun, a small hooded figure floated with a glowing wooden chest, offering a sincere apology that the flustered warrior tried to cut short by insisting he had done nothing wrong. Peering into a wooden chest, the specter of his past weighed heavily on the blonde-haired Sanghyun, who realized his life was nothing but a collection of regrets. The unforgettable image of the hero standing before him was forever seared into Sanghyun's memory, a moment that inspired him to work tirelessly to one day become just like him. Before a blinding, ethereal light, the warrior Sanghyun stood with his back to the world, confessing only to himself the profound exhaustion of age that now weighed him down. Bathed in the golden light of an ancient tome, a mysterious hooded figure was filled with a quiet regret for the youth they no longer possessed. A knowing smile touched Sanghyun's lips as he peered over the wooden surface, his large glasses reflecting a scene only he seemed to fully comprehend. With an air of weary resignation, Sanghyun closed his eyes and announced his impending retirement, a decision underscored by the ominous surge of purple energy that suddenly flared to life around him. Amidst a sudden, deafening whirl of purple energy, Sanghyun stared in astonishment as a mysterious hooded being materialized before him, holding a glowing, open book. In a violent swirl of purple energy, Sanghyun's body began to horrifically dissolve, his voice stammering a terrified question to Mr. Scholar as he felt himself melt away. The last thing he remembered as a 55-year-old was this very moment, as the late-blooming scholar finally initiated the transformative essence he had spent years researching. As reality fractured into a void of brilliant blue light, a powerful incantation resounded, commanding time to rewind its course. In a world forever altered by supernatural upheaval, the story of humanity's struggle began with the sudden, terrifying appearance of two phenomena, dungeons and gates. With a confident smile for the camera, journalist Jongmin Park of the Player Times began his segment by explaining that these were the very places where awakened individuals, known as players, could showcase their skills. Elaborating on this point was Hyun Jong-han, the sophisticated CEO of Hyunjong Corporation, who affirmed with a faint smile that dungeons are to be seen as the very foundation for a player's development. Seated together on a park bench beneath a clear sky, the man began to unravel the mystery of the gates for his companion, explaining that they were portals linked to unknown, other-dimensional realms. In the glow of a television screen, Sanghyun absorbed a news report detailing how players must build their foundation by exploring unknown gates and dungeons, his mind already racing with what to expect from them this year. Sitting cross-legged with a confident smirk, Sanghyun meticulously polished his dagger, reflecting with a wave of nostalgia that he had finally returned to a show he knew all too well. The nostalgic smirk, however, had faded over the past 4 days into a pensive anxiety as he gripped the wrapped blade, grappling with the undeniable certainty that he had returned exactly 30 years into the past. After his world went black, Sanghyun's consciousness returned with a violent jolt, finding himself sitting up in the impossibly familiar bed of the tiny apartment he hadn't seen in 30 years. The impossible truth then crashed over him with dizzying force. He had somehow awoken as his 25-year-old self, yet retained every single memory of the long life he had already lived. As he began to narrate the cause of his regression, a fractured vision flickered into existence, revealing Sanghyun himself as a luminous figure pushing back against a tide of amorphous, dripping shadows. The sheer impossibility of the vision led to one inescapable conclusion: Mr. Scholar must have performed a miracle, as there was no other way to explain it. Casting aside his admitted confusion with a confident wink, Sanghyun committed to immediate action, his resolve taking the form of a glowing sword drawn from its ornate sheath. In the quiet aftermath of his victory, a system window shimmered into existence, revealing the stats of his newly acquired prize, the Dagger of Venamos, a bronze artifact that promised a considerable boost to his attack and dexterity. With a firm grip that spoke of his resolve, Sanghyun presented an ornate dagger glowing with power, explaining that this bronze-tier weapon was a fortunate acquisition for this point in time. Though its tier was considered disappointingly low, Sanghyun's sword suddenly revealed its true potential, unleashing a hidden skill that enveloped the blade in an intense, crackling aura. A glowing system interface materialized in the darkness, its text rapidly calculating the final stat absorption rate by combining the 10% base for his bronze rank item with a 10% usage duration bonus, settling on a final value of 20%. Surrounded by a radiating blue aura, Sanghyun's eyes glowed with immense power, a confident smirk touching his lips as he mused that the absorption rate was still low, having only recently acquired it. In a dazzling moment of clarity, The true key to power was revealed not in what he had already learned, but in the immense potential of a hidden skill. On a shimmering blue grid, a torrent of mana erupted around Sangyeon as he initiated synchronization with the Dagger of Venomos, the overwhelming power surging through him before plunging his world into a gap of unconsciousness. A profound and silent blackness consumed everything. Within a shimmering expanse of golden blue light, the white-haired Sangyeon materialized, explaining that this mental space was where he devoured artifacts, a process that always filled him with nervous anticipation for the unknown. The air crackled with a magical energy as Sangyeon watched, speechless, while the dish inside the pot began to sparkle and glow with an otherworldly golden light. In a shower of magical sparks, the absorption of the Dagger of Venomos was declared complete, revealing to a wide-eyed Sangyeon a perfectly roasted and shimmering chicken presented with a triumphant flourish. A magnificent rotisserie barbecue chicken, drizzled with olive oil and steaming invitingly, promised the start of a truly decadent feast. A shimmer of blue energy seemed to sparkle around Sangyeon as he beamed with relief, privately thankful to have received a normal dish instead of the swampy centipede soup he had been dreading. With an aura of power radiating from his glowing hair and eyes, Sangyeon brought the transformed Dagger of Venomos to his lips, smirking as he declared he would gladly devour such a prize. It began with a surge of power, as glowing notifications confirmed a sudden increase in his dexterity and the momentous acquisition of the hidden skill, Demon Bash. In a digital expanse of glowing blue light, a notification confirmed the complete absorption of the Dagger of Venomos as the artifact itself disintegrated into shimmering particles and vanished into an eternal abyss. With a sudden flare of magical energy, a translucent system window began to dissipate before Sangyeon, who reflected on the shame of losing a dagger he never would have used anyway. Empowered by a skill he could finally use, Sangyeon glanced back with a confident smirk, resolving that it was time to get going. With an ominous hum that echoed through the city streets, a colossal blue energy sphere materialized in the sky, heralding the arrival of Dungeon 85 and summoning Team Daegyeongyeon to the scene. On a bustling street, Captain Yoon's concentration on his datapad was shattered by a frantic voice, and upon recognizing the approaching man, he immediately asked what was going on. As a uniformed man reported that a new recruit named Sanghyun Shin was missing, a commanding figure calmly interrupted, explaining not to worry as he had personally decided to include the newcomer on the player team. Sweat beaded on the bearded man's brow as he reacted with sheer disbelief, questioning how someone he considered a mere mules could possibly be joining the player team. Towering over his subordinate in full armor, Sangyeon coolly confirmed his approval of the controversial decision, dismissing the man's frantic shouts that the newly awakened individual was not yet ready. Amidst the tense pre-raid preparations, one armored player's voice cut through the air as he loudly protested to Sangyeon about an unqualified member unfairly joining their team for a share of the loot, prompting his exasperated leader to declare that was enough. The world seemed to shrink for one terrified man as a colossal figure in ornate armor leaned over him, prompting a stammered apology to the imposing mule captain. Leaning in with a confident smirk, a powerful adventurer reminded the terrified Sangyeon that he had it all figured out and that their party split loot based on performance, eliciting a stammered, fearful apology. As two imposing armored figures stood before him in a vast, ethereal blue void, Sangyeon could only sneer internally at the losers, disgusted by their audacity to whine about fairness. Amidst the relative quiet of the barracks, two armored men approached their captain, one finally voicing their shared curiosity about why he had taken in the mysterious newcomer. In response, the captain offered a sinister grin as he laid out his cold calculus. The newcomer's death was a no-loss situation that would intimidate the other mules into silence and protect their market value. The air in the glowing blue rift crackled with derision as two armored figures openly questioned what a level 1 could possibly do, only for the newcomer, Sangyeon, to calmly offer a greeting in response. Against the backdrop of a sprawling city, a confident young man named Sanghyun Shin gripped his sword and announced that his life as a player was just beginning. In a silent, charged confrontation, Sanghyun and his two companions fixed their unyielding gazes forward, the air heavy with unspoken hostility. That unspoken hostility shattered in an instant, replaced by knowing smirks as a silent challenge passed between the two men. Stepping into the heart of a tense gathering, the swordsman Sangyeon found himself encircled by shadowy figures with menacing red eyes, inwardly smirking that their blatant hostility was the only reception he'd expected. His expectation of hostility was shattered, however, when a large, armored man broke the tension with a booming laugh, joyfully welcoming Sangyeon by name and teasing him for almost being late on his first day. A vibrant blue aura flared to life behind Sanghyun, his confident smirk widening as his gaze fixed on something off-panel, wondering about the weapon he now faced. In response to the unspoken question, he scratched his head with a broad smile and cheerfully admitted that while it was indeed a great sword, his expertise came entirely from watching countless Metubi videos. In a surreal, glowing blue snowscape, Sangyeon met his companion's concern with unwavering confidence, admitting the greatsword was difficult but vowing to take care of himself. Suddenly, a booming laugh shattered the moment as a massive, armored man clapped Sanghyun hard on the shoulder, loudly praising the boy's spirit and declaring he had some real man in him, just like himself. As his boisterous companions roared that it was showtime, Sanghyun stood composed before the glowing dungeon gate, a quiet determination setting him apart from the party's explosive energy. As a massive blue energy vortex erupted with a deafening roar, a team of armored figures steeled themselves on the glowing platform, receiving the command to enter and wait for the others just beyond the portal's shimmering threshold. Before the humming blue energy of a portal, Sanghaehan stood with his armored companions, listening as their pre-mission banter crackled with competitive boasts about who would claim the most kills. A tense silence fell as the enigmatic Sanghyun appeared in a brilliant blue aura, his powerful presence immediately drawing the cautious gaze of a heavily armored knight. A stern, armored man looked on with open contempt, scoffing at the idea that one could learn about dungeon raids from MeTube and questioning if the whole endeavor was being treated as a joke. Amidst a faint, sparkling blue aura, the newly awakened Sanghyun exuded a dangerous arrogance, his smirk betraying a confidence so profound that it seemed to invite a swift demise. In the oppressive darkness of the dungeon, Sanghyun came face to face with a wall of snarling red-eyed orcs, recalling the walkthrough's warning that this was the infamous wall of instant regret for any novice. From the shadows, a spiky-haired man's malevolent grin stretched across his face as he gloated that the naive moron would soon be learning his lesson the hard way. Sweat pouring down his face, Sangyeon could only stare in stunned disbelief, his mind condemning the utter, naive foolishness of what he was witnessing. Amidst the rubble and the mangled corpse of a monstrous beast, a squad of armored soldiers stared in disbelief, wondering who this mysterious kid could possibly be. In the stark aftermath of a brutal conflict, an intense light from below revealed the defeated forms of two monstrous combatants, their massive axes scattered uselessly across the gridded floor. In the stunned silence following an immense display of power, Sanghyun stared at the fallen, grotesque creature before him, his sword's blue energy casting a faint glow as he wondered what he had just witnessed. In a moment of grim resolve, a swirling dark aura erupted around Sanghyun, the sudden surge of power igniting his eye with a cold blue light. In the annals of fantasy, orcs are depicted as common monsters, and amidst a desolate, crimson-hued landscape, the hulking form of one such creature stood as a grim testament to their savage reputation. Amidst a desolate, fiery realm, a tattered red banner bore the skulls of a clan whose very familiarity had bred a dangerous misconception among the people. The war concluded on a desolate battlefield under a fiery sky, where the corpse of a great green-skinned warrior served as the final, brutal proof that they were weak. While orcs were considered unintelligent and violent, the emergence of a colossal, shadowy figure wielding a luminous blade amidst an explosion of dark energy served as a stark reminder of what true power looked like. It was precisely this kind of overwhelming power that caused overly confident rookies to forget the fundamental tendencies of orcs and charge headfirst into their den. The battlefield ignited in a brilliant flash of light as Sangyeon surged forward with a fierce grin, announcing his arrival while musing that orcs were defined by very simple characteristics. In a blur of motion, his hand shot out to seize his opponent, but his triumphant grin was instantly replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Trapped in the grasp of a monstrous orc standing 8 feet tall and weighing over 400 pounds, Sanghyun kicked out in defiance, the overwhelming gap in their strength, a crushing reality. In a violent eruption of crimson energy, Sanghyun's monstrous new form loomed with glowing red eyes, its power undeniably absolute and ready to crush all that stood in its way. The story begins with a stark warning, explaining why orcs earned the fearsome reputation of being a wall of instant regret for any unprepared novice. Deep within an ancient structure, Sanghyun and his party ventured forward through a dimly lit, arched stone passage, their footsteps echoing with a mix of determination and caution. Halting their progress, a stern, armored man singled out Sanghyun, warning the rookie that he would receive no special treatment and must learn to take care of himself. As the newly awakened Sanghyun strode forward with a massive sword slung over his shoulder, another player watched with open contempt, scornfully muttering about the insolent newcomer already posturing like a seasoned pro. Carrying a massive, worn sword on his back, Sanghyun offered an awkward smile as he scratched his cheek, humbly promising to try his best while wryly noting the difficulty of finding groups that wouldn't need to take it easy on him. As Sangyan observed with a calm and detached gaze, the tense air was shattered by an armored man furiously berating a dejected figure, declaring that simply trying their best was meaningless with such measly skills. In a moment charged with unspoken anticipation, the enigmatic Sung Hyan offered only a subtle, confident smirk, his gaze fixed on the path that lay ahead. Boldly, Sung Hyan offered to take point if monsters appeared, a challenge that immediately provoked the armored man, who began to lecture the rookie about having no time for his gains. The calm was abruptly shattered by what Sung Hyan witnessed just off-panel, his expression twisting into a mask of worried confusion as a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. The relative calm was shattered in an instant as a monstrous orc with glowing red eyes and a massive axe loomed over the two terrified figures, one of whom cried out in horror at the sight of the beast. With a confident smile, Sung Hyan drew his massive sword, eagerly declaring that this first battle since the rewind was his to take, causing the shadowy figure before him to recoil in surprise. A monstrous roar and the deafening clang of steel shattered the silence as Sung Hyan, a bulwark in dark armor, braced his shield against the overwhelming force of a hulking green creature. In the midst of a frantic clash, Sung Hyan's face contorted in alarm as he roared a desperate question, asking if his companion was deliberately courting death by handling a greatsword with such sluggish incompetence. In the heat of battle against a hulking green orc, an armored warrior deflected a crushing blow while challenging the calmly observing Sung Hyan to stop talking and back up his words. In the middle of a furious tirade against the ungrateful individual he had just saved, the armored warrior's anger instantly turned to shock as an axe suddenly cleaved the air right above him. The battle erupted in a deafening slam as a monstrous green creature's attack violently struck a warrior's shield, an intense moment witnessed by a focused Sung Hyan. With a ground-shattering crash, the armored warrior Sung Hyan began his assault, slamming his shield into a monstrous foe and driving it deep into the earth. A large, armored man's furious shout shattered the tense air as he demanded to know if Sung Hyan and his comrade were enjoying a picnic and ordered them to wake up. In the face of a roaring green monstrosity, a heavily armored knight stepped past his fellow adventurers, silencing their fearful shouts by declaring that he would be the one to take on the beast. True to his word, he met the creature's monstrous roar with a resounding clang, its powerful blows stopping cold against his expertly raised shield and sword. In a furious, desperate onslaught, Sung Hyan thrust his sword into the hulking green beast, demanding to know if this was the extent of its power. In the heart of a ferocious battle, the resolute warrior Sung Hyan drove his blade deep into a monstrous beast, its pained growl echoing as green blood dripped from the mortal wound. As their unseen foe collapsed, a triumphant roar erupted from the adventurers, who hailed their captain, Sung Hyan, for the flawless strike that had pierced its heart. A deep, menacing growl erupted from the monstrous, green-skinned face that filled the view, its glowing red eyes burning with pure, unadulterated fury. The battle erupted in a guttural roar as the armored warrior Sung Hyan drove his blade deep into the monstrous foe, even as its colossal axe began a deadly descent. As a monstrous green creature retaliated with a furious, ground-shattering blow, the armored knight Sung Hyan could only wonder if his own recent attack had been too shallow. The resounding clash of metal gave way to a decisive smash, and through it all, Sung Hyan watched with a calm, unyielding focus. His gaze settled on Dae Gyeongyun, the strongest in the group, who barely deflected the orc's heavy strike, a clear sign to Sung Hyan that the man wasn't powerful enough to hit the creature's vitals. Roaring that he'd had enough, the warrior Sung Hyan brought his glowing sword down upon the shadowed monster in a brilliant, decisive strike. The brilliant strike was followed by a vicious thrust as he drove the glowing dagger deep into the creature's chest, growling for it to finally go to sleep. As the final orc crashed to the ground, Sung Hyan stood as the sole victor, leaving the onlookers to stammer in awe that he had defeated the monstrous foes all by himself. A smug laugh escaped him as he boasted about the easy victory, his confidence only momentarily shifting as he checked to see if everyone else was all right. As the masked leader Sung Hyan surged forward with unwavering confidence, his followers roared in unified support, vowing to follow their captain all the way. He commanded them to push forward with their momentum, his voice escalating into a ferocious roar that was suddenly severed by a choked cry of agony. With a deafening roar, a tusked, red-skinned creature with glowing eyes led its monstrous horde into a furious charge, their axes glinting with malice. Panic erupted among the armored soldiers as the sight of approaching high orcs, and a hulking armored orc among them, sent them crying out to their captain for orders. Deep within a perilous dungeon, the party's leader, Sung Hyan, grappled with the grim realization that retreating was the only way to survive the unexpectedly fierce orc swarm. In the flickering torchlight of a deep dungeon, as a horde of monstrous red creatures swarmed towards the armored warriors, Sang Yihan broke the tense standoff by asking if he could be the one to engage them first. In the tense aftermath of his words, Sang Hin-shin stood as a solitary, unreadable figure, while his armed comrades erupted in a fury of disbelief, demanding to know if he had lost his mind. As an armored companion tried to warn him about recklessly enjoying his new powers, Sang Yin parried a sudden attack with his dark sword, his face a mask of pure bewilderment. Ignoring the desperate cry that he would get himself killed, Sang Yin swung his ornate dark weapon in a devastating arc, the resulting explosion illuminating a hidden horde of menacing red creatures. In the desolate gloom, a grotesque creature splattered apart as Sang Hen stood over it, casually remarking to himself that the greatsword was quite nice and had made a very clean split. In the heart of the battle, 3 armored adventurers froze in stunned disbelief, their minds struggling to comprehend how a single swing from a greatsword had just cleaved a high orc cleanly in 2. As glowing notifications confirmed he had leveled up, a confident Sanghen rested his greatsword on his shoulder, musing that the kill had felt disappointingly dull, perhaps because his level was still so low. In the quiet aftermath of his first true test, a system window flickered into existence, displaying Sang Hyun-shin's new status and the unique, world-altering skill he now possessed, Devour Artifact. It began in a silent, stark white void where the world had not yet taken form. A sudden, guttural roar shattered the silence, erupting from a massive red-skinned beast whose glowing eyes burned with rage as a legion of similar monsters gathered in the shadows behind it. As hulking red monsters swarmed him from all sides, Sang Yihan defied his own self-doubt about being low-level, unleashing a powerful cry that struck one of the beasts down mid-assault. With a confident declaration of his extensive experience, Sang Yin's gloved hand clenched a rough, dark object, his grip tightening with grim resolve. In the heart of a chaotic battle, Sang Yin launched himself into the air, his glowing sword a beacon of pure determination as it descended upon a monstrous, red-skinned beast. In a blinding flash of blue energy, Sang Henyon surged forward with glowing eyes, his voice a low mutter questioning if his opponent truly understood the power he now faced. In a maelstrom of red fur and spraying blood, the seasoned warrior Sang Yen cleaved through another beast, casually wondering aloud just how many of these brutes he had slain in his youth. The armored onlookers could only gape in shared disbelief, struggling to comprehend how a mere rookie could be powerful enough to potentially slaughter every last one of his opponents. With his eyes blazing an ethereal blue and a bloodied sword hovering menacingly above, Sang Yihan pointed forward, declaring that now it was just the 2 of them. Across the desolate, snow-covered ground, Sang Hen faced a colossal new threat, his bloodied sword held at the ready as he breathed out its name, an armored orc. With a primal roar tearing through the air, Sang Hin, now a monstrous red-skinned entity fueled by pure rage, lunged forward in a ferocious blur. A monstrous, armored figure's colossal weapon came crashing down in a devastating arc, forcing Sang Yen to evade the explosive impact as his eyes flared with a sudden, brilliant blue light. Amid the swirling chaos of battle, Sang Yeon became a blur of motion, his sword flaring with brilliant energy as he unleashed a swift, decisive slash against the towering red beast. In an instant, the slash connected with a sickening splash, ripping through the red beast's mass and sending a geyser of blood and viscera into the air. Amid the fury of battle, Sang Hyun's face twisted in frustration as he roared that the enemy's armor was too thick, his desperate attack having been far too shallow. Amid a desperate cry of warning, a horned monster with glowing red eyes exploded into a deadly charge, hurtling directly toward the stunned Sang Hyun. In a blur of motion, Sang Hyun lunged forward with fierce concentration, the world streaking past him in an instant. Suddenly, the world around him dissolved into a silent, featureless expanse of pure white. As a towering, indistinct figure loomed behind him, Sang Hyun brought the scene to a sudden halt with a confident smirk, his piercing blue eyes demanding to know what all the fuss was about. A towering, red-skinned demon reeled back in shock as the air itself seemed to announce the sudden activation of the Demon Bash skill. The battle reached a critical point as Sang Hyun, wreathed in a sinister purple aura, unleashed the stunning power of his hidden skill, Demon Bash, causing the horned monster before him to tremble uncontrollably. As the monster trembled helplessly, he closed in with a confident smirk, ordering the good boys to stay still as his glowing blade flashed towards its mark. In a blinding surge of power, the transformed Sang Hyun let out a ferocious roar, his monstrous red-skinned form radiating an aura of pure, unadulterated rage. The air itself seemed to tear apart as Sang Hyun, a blur of motion and fury, unleashed a devastating slash trailed by ribbons of crimson energy. Within the Grand Hall, the climactic battle concluded as the massive red-skinned monster roared its last, collapsing in a gruesome splash of blood before the assembled knights. A terrifying dark force slammed into the earth with a deafening thud. leaving the armored warrior Sung Haeyeon and his companion reeling as he struggled to believe what was happening. Amidst the ruins of a great hall, Sang-yen stood triumphant over a mountain of defeated monsters, leaving the armored spectators to whisper in disbelief about how he could unleash a full stun, a power he had supposedly gained only 3 days before. He loomed over one of the heavily damaged opponents, his massive blood-stained greatsword plunged into the ground, and inwardly corrected their assessment, realizing the effect was far more powerful than a simple stagger. Amidst a blur of indistinct motion, a voice cut through the tension, questioning the established benchmark by recalling that even the highest-ranking players peaked at 1.5 seconds. Their expressions of shock and disbelief confirmed the unbelievable feat, as one of the armored men turned to his companion, asking if the greatsword user was a little too good and jokingly wondering what Mitube video he could have possibly watched. In the tense quiet that followed the battle, Sang-yeon's mind reeled as a cold sweat broke across his brow, his thoughts consumed by the impossible sight of an armored orc brought down by a simple stun skill. His shock quickly evaporated into a smug grin as he wondered if he'd gotten them all, an incredible display that left an unseen witness questioning how a supposed novice could command such a powerful skill. As Sang-yen stood in thoughtful silence, a system notification chimed to life before him, its blue light announcing that he had leveled up and acquired the curious title of Fearless Puppy. His surprise at receiving a title quickly turned to delight as he realized the fantastic +5 evasion bonus it granted was an unexpected reward on top of the level up he already knew was coming. In the encompassing void, the ethereal glow of a system screen illuminated Sang Haeyeon's determined expression as it offered a single bonus stat point, but his mind was already set on which attribute to raise. Recalling a critical lesson learned too late in his previous life, Sang Haeyeon's gloved finger tapped the virtual screen to increase his luck stat, a choice he now understood was absolutely essential for success. The air filled with intrigue as a system notification announced a slight increase in Sang Haeyeon's luck, his glowing blue eyes remaining perfectly calm as a stunned, armored man approached to ask if he could possibly be a mere newbie. In the tense aftermath of an unseen attack, a shocked man in partial armor broke the silence, demanding to know where such an impossible stun skill had been acquired. A single drop of sweat betraying his calm facade, Sang-yen hid the truth of his time-traveling past behind a cunning grin, casually explaining that he had only just awakened his unique ability. The confrontation erupted as an enraged man in armor, pointing an accusatory finger, roared at a stoic Sang-hen, demanding to know how any of this could possibly make sense. In the charged aftermath of a duel, an armored figure spat defiance, accusing the shadowy swordsman Sang Hang-hin of winning through nothing more than sheer luck. As mystical blue energy swirled around a magnificent blade plunged into the earth, an unseen accuser challenged Sang-yeon, claiming he had somehow obtained an artifact of at least diamond tier. With a sudden flick of his wrist and a confident smile, Sang Haeyeon presented a bloodied sword, casually asking the terrified man before him if he wanted a closer look. With a theatrical cough and a feigned reluctance, the armored warrior finally acquiesced, drawing a surprisingly humble greatsword whose unimpressive stats materialized in the air before him. Amidst the tension of their standoff, the armored man's fury gave way to utter shock as he realized the artifact was powerless, forcing him to confront the staggering truth that the skill he had just witnessed was Sang Haeyeon's alone. 2 years of raiding dungeons had brought Sang Haeyeon to level 50, yet his face, tight with frustration, revealed the bitter truth that he still lacked the one skill he desperately needed, a failure he knew would ruin his share of the rewards. As a monstrous mini-boss materialized within the Grand Chamber, a panicked voice cried out to Captain Sang-hyun, warning him that the creature had spawned. Responding to his subordinate's concerned plea, the armored captain, Sang Haeyeon, steeled his expression and gave the resolute command for them to advance. In the gloom of the dungeon, surrounded by the aftermath of his battle, Sang-yen was approached by a group of armored adventurers whose blonde-haired leader condescendingly thanked him for clearing out the trash mobs only to warn him not to get too cocky. With a grim expression, Sang-hyun considered the impending battle, convinced that flashy skills would be useless against the demon orc they were about to face. A knowing grin spread across Sang Haeyeon's face as he suddenly recalled the true, cunning reason he had sought out this party the moment he returned to the past. The air crackled with tension as one of 3 armored men questioned if he was truly facing the infamous Captain Yun, while another scoffed with a knowing smirk, offering the captain a chance to back down if he was afraid. In the echoing silence of a ruined hall, Sang-hyun stood victorious over the massive demon orc he had slain alone, turning to his apprehensive companions to ask if they were truly okay with him handling such a threat by himself. Bathed in the triumphant golden glow of his success, Sang-yen couldn't help but smile as he considered the tantalizing possibility of keeping the artifact drop entirely for himself.